In higher ed, we're all looking for big wins, but reducing a 75% application abandonment rate and achieving a 90% conversion rate, that's next level transformation. Michael Bettersworth, CMO at Texas State Technical College, shares how they achieved this by streamlining the application process with Element 451.
Our Element journey began out of a necessity. We were switching to a new SIS, and the application process was going to pose some real usability issues for us. We felt that application was going to hamper our enrollment. So we began quickly to evaluate different CRMs, different applications. So for context on that, our conversion rate with the prior application had about 75% abandonment of people clicking apply to submit. And the first weeks after going live with Element, we saw an 80% conversion, and that's now up to 90. So improving the usability of that application on the front end process has had a significant advance in our intake.
When technology works for students, it works for you. Visit element451.com to see how simplifying the application process with artificial intelligence will lead to significant results for your institution.
Hit it! That's what I'm talking about. Wait!
Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
Welcome to Strategic Storytelling, the art and science of brand narratives, a special 5-part strategic storytelling pulse check series brought to you by Enrollify and Element 451. I'm Maria Kuntz, a strategic marketing communications leader with over 15 years of experience advancing institutional reputations and access to higher education. Join me for conversations with seasoned leaders to explore why every message should be rooted in strategy, how to build and lead a storytelling-focused team, the role of AI in enhancing narratives, multicultural storytelling for authentic connections, and the synergy between creative and storytelling strategies. Our goal is to inspire you to uncover and amplify the most impactful messages, doing more with less by adopting a strategic, streamlined approach to content creation. Now, let's dive into today's episode. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome Frank Tramble, Vice President for Communications, Marketing, and Public Affairs at Duke University. Frank leads Duke's central communications and branding efforts, shaping its reputation and strategic priorities. Before Duke, he elevated Howard University's profile with innovative initiatives like The Dig and an award-winning magazine redesign, earning national attention, including a Sports Illustrated cover story. As an adjunct professor and sought-after speaker, Frank brings unmatched expertise in brand strategy, crisis communications, and integrated marketing. Frank, it's an honor to have you here with us today.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me on the show.
Let's dive in. You have been at Duke for about a year and a half. Can you tell us about your path to this role and your team and what's currently evolving?
I've been here for 18 months. I'm not counting, but 18 months. So it's been a wonderful journey. I can't say I expected to be here with Duke, but I'm so happy that I am. My career started at Michigan State University, so I've been in higher education for a long time. Honestly, the whole being in higher education side of my career started as a student telemarketer at Michigan State University. And I just thought I'd get another job as a student. And then, I got in and I think I never left. My career trajectory is a little bit interesting, especially coming into this particular role, because I kind of came up from the communication side under the development and marketing functionalities. And so I started telling donor stories, and I started to build out these large profiles and raising lots of money for the institutions I worked for. So it's really started on that side. And then moving into a lot of the other spaces, I'm also a professor of integrated marketing communications at Georgetown University. And a lot of these spaces, I started to see this need for blending the world as I started to do all these outside projects too. I've done projects with Lululemon and Nike and some other places that were kind of outside of the higher education scape. And as I studied and learned and then worked with these companies, I started to realize that higher education is behind not only just terminologies, but the practices, marketing practices, integrated functionalities, and even also the business acumen in the space of how to change quickly. And I started to see that there was a need there. So I really wanted to, put my stakes in the ground in a career that meant a lot to me. Higher education's meant everything to me. So that's kind of led me into this path. And then I found myself to a wonderful institution like Duke. So.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I think a lot of people have a winding path, and that's really, I didn't know that you'd worked with, you said Lululemon and Nike?
Yeah, Lululemon and Nike. I've done some big marketing campaigns for them, and I'm a runner. So just my
Ah,
personal life, I love running. I started a running
perfect
community,
match.
so I had a great opportunity to do a lot of fun things in the running space for Lululemon and Nike. And actually, my wife, who's also a runner, started an organization with me, was the face of a campaign for Saucony, the shoe brand, and did a global campaign. And so you have my son and my wife all involved in there,
Oh
and
my
then you got
gosh,
to
I'm going to
blend
see you
all of
everywhere
my worlds
now.
together.
Well, that's such a
Yeah.
good segue to, I mean, I think one of the things we spoke about before, and I heard you speak about at AMA, was this difference between sort of traditional news storytelling and strategic brand storytelling.
Mhm.
And I'd love if you could speak more to that and how you're approaching that in your current role or in other roles.
The space in which we serve as communications marketer, public affairs officials inside of organizations, our job is to be able to promote the brand of who we are. The news storytelling functionality really was important when the outlet in which people engaged with your brand was the news, the primary outlet. In order for you to get information about the institution, it was on the news. And that was traditional. That was in your print media. That was in your local media, that was in your national media in those spaces. And then over really in 2000, and I'd say 4 is when the world really started to change. 2004, 2005, social media came aboard, and then the ability and at least the access in which people started to engage with your brand changed. It went from TV that was and also I'll say even 24-hour news cycles changed things too, but it went from engaging with TV as the primary source to now having access to information all the time on your phone, to then changing where the number of journalists, and I quote that heavily because
Mm-hmm.
everyone with a phone seems to be journalists, but the number of trusted journalists and trusted by your own space became infinite. And so that meant that the way that we communicated couldn't be traditional. News has been always about just what's happening, not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily about what is important to your brand. And brand storytelling is really that filter of, here are the things that we have defined on who we are, what we believe in, and here are the stories that exemplify those stories. News can be something as simple as, we put up trees today that were 100 years old. It's not a brand story. The brand story could be that this particular tree was integral to something that was wildly important about who you are, and how removing this tree was a huge undertaking because this person who's been here for 100 years planted this tree and donated this. There's ways to make that into it, but the filter in which that story gets told is really between that news and brand.
I wonder, do you ever see folks giving you feedback, or when you're trying to tell a brand story, I think sometimes I've encountered folks are looking for a news story. They're readers, community members, alums, students who are really used to the news format and look to the brand story as and kind of hold it up against to the same standards as a newspaper story.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something you all talk about, you've experienced?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, I personally think both still have places. It's more or less about, when we talk about news, like, you don't need the news stories. No, you do need them, but it's for a different audience, and that audience that cares that much about the news, you have to then pull into the brand story. Again, the news can be, the institution is now the number one research institution in America. That's news. There is a space for that, and when you build your platforms, that's something that should be talked about. However, you can't let that be the end. Where you pull people in after that is, what makes you the number one research institution? Who's behind the research? Why are you doing this type of research? How does
Mm-hmm.
this research affect you where you are anywhere in the world? Why is that important to you? Like, that's the difference between when you're saying, news versus brand. I don't think it's an either or. I think it's very much a both right now. And if you think about it, the generational gap between both of those, people are coming to your brand in different ways. How
Mm-hmm.
they get there is not as important as you making sure that when they get there through whatever door that you've created, that you have an ability to pull them in and get them to the points that you want them to know.
Yeah, I love that. It's about wherever you find them because I think sometimes, if we get stuck in it's what's right or wrong, we miss the bigger picture, which is
Hmm.
how do we bring people in and how do we build the reputation and knowing.
Yeah, exactly.
With so many hundreds of stories, how do you and your team decide what becomes part of Duke's big story? And we're using Duke because you work there now, but this applies to
Hmm.
any brand, maybe.
I had this question asked to me actually when I first got here to do. How do we make that decision? And I said, well, start with your filters. There's a lot of different stories. One, what's the story you're supposed to be telling? You, you and your team. What's that story? What is your role and your job in an organization? Because sometimes we're all a part of an ecosystem. There's sometimes as a central team, we have what we call the big Duke story. We have 400 different communicators across the Duke sphere, all of us telling the same story over and over and over again at the same time, just because we have different platforms, is not a coordinated method. But understanding what your part of that story is. So, for instance, if one of our schools has a story about a curriculum that's gone out, their job is to tell that story to their audience about what is in that curriculum and what is important about it, and to those most connected. For
Hmm.
us, we're the big Duke story. Telling that story isn't necessarily the angle that we care about. What we do care about is how is that going to affect the institution as a whole. What about the interdisciplinary of this particular culture will affect everyone in their spaces and be able to uplift that. And then the third thing is trying to be able to take the filters of your either strategic vision or
Hmm.
priorities, whatever framework or terminology your school is using, be able to take those and overlay that and be able to effectively say that you are telling stories that fit these marks. That when we talk about interdisciplinary, that is something that we tell stories about. So we are constantly looking at across. Not we need one. We need more than two schools to engage in something for it to for it to be interdisciplinary. So it's about taking those filters and having the right ones, and then being able to shape that into how you tell the story. Now, the other part to that too, and this is where it gets to be a little bit of a struggle, especially in higher education, is you'll come in and say, well, that's not how things have been done,
Hmm.
or this is how this people are used to doing those things. Well, guess what? It's time to walk people down a different road, and also it's time to update your digital channels to reflect, because that editorial strategy has to
Hmm.
be connected to the functionality of how your digital stories are being told, and then also how you're then pushing them out in a marketing space.
You just reminded me early in my career, there was a colleague at another school, and they had these Post it notes and they had this long acronym, 8 letters with a red circle, like the circle around it and the slash through it. And the acronym, when pronounced, was Biddy Waddy. And I was like, what is this and why do you have them? And they said the acronym stood for because that's the way we always did it. And they were like, we're done with that. That doesn't cut it
Yeah.
anymore.
Again, I believe in traditions. I don't like to change things just to change it, but I feel like all of our responsibilities, at least annually, is to take everything we're doing and say, why are we still doing it, and should we still be doing it?
Absolutely.
If we have to ask ourselves those two questions all the time, because if you don't, then you get stale, you get old, and that's just not what we want. We have to stay fresh, and we are literally training and getting the freshest minds on a constant basis every single year. They're changing. We've got to be able to change with it. And honestly, our jobs are really difficult because the way that a 17, 18-year-old sees the world and the way a 80 or 90-year-old sees the world are two very different places. And that's why, again, at this particular point, the integrated fashion is the most important element, because
Yeah.
you got to still account for the 80 or 90-year-old individual who's been a part of this institution forever and you care a ton about, and also the newest person to that community who's learning what it is and actually honestly redefining the institution in the 4 years that they're going to be there.
Absolutely. And I think how they're finding out about universities. I mean, I'm
Mhm.
really cognizant of this. I have 2 high schoolers who are getting ready for college. And I've been wondering, like
Yeah.
what are they looking at? What are they digging
Yeah.
into? What's standing out to them? So they're studying for finals right now, but it's kind of been on my mind over break. I'm like, I want to show me your feed. What's happening in
Yeah.
there?
And honestly, that's where your brand ambassadors are the students. They go on TikTok, they find other students who are there and they want real live lived experiences. And I'm always happy to take care of colleagues when I know they've got a kid coming and they're visiting Duke or something, and I'm always inviting them over and I meet them, and you know, the parent is always excited to like introduce me to their child, and I'm like, your child cares nothing about me. Yeah. There's nothing about this. There's nothing about this place that I can tell this person right here to say that they're going to believe me. Who they need to see is someone who looks like them, who they can connect with, that can give them a real conversation. That's the person they're going to care the most about.
Because that's who they're going to spend their time with. Those are the people they're going to be, you know, grinding out homework with and drinking coffee or chai late at night trying to get something done. Let me ask you about campaigns. Because I think when we're talking about picking the right stories and we're talking about using our resources wisely, not overtaxing our teams.
Struggling to make sense of endless research? At the AI Engage Summit, you'll get a hands-on tutorial and meet Notebook LM, Google's AI assistant that transforms complex information like academic papers and lecture videos into content that will engage your target audience. The event is free and virtual. Register now at enrollify.org/engage.
We really have to get into the point of making decisions, and we can tell 100 stories at a shallow level, or we can tell fewer stories at a deep level. And we have to think about, you know, campaigns, whether that's an enrollment campaign, reputation and brand, a fundraising campaign. I'd love to hear you talk about finding those campaign stories and also balancing just the volume of storytelling.
Let me start just a little bit back. I got my degree in advertising, and the whole reason why I got into this field in general was I did a psychology, a kind of minor in the space. And so I looked and I got so interested in the psychology of human thought process and behavior. I got an assignment one time to go and sit at a a bus station, and actually, you know, for 45 minutes, sit and look and analyze every person walking, how they walk, their center of balance, what shoes they had on, did they have a limp, where do you think they were coming from, like everything about a person, just sit and people watch. I was supposed to do it for 45 minutes. I sat there for like 3 or 4 hours. And it was because I'm just enthralled with how people think. And I say that because when we're talking about what decisions to make, we've got to think about what are the right things that drive insight and behavior. You know, there's a lot of right answers about a lot of things. I use this example all the time. Maria, do you use an iPhone or Android?
I'm iPhone.
Are you team iPhone? Can I get you to buy Android?
I mean, my dad's been trying. I'm so bought in, but maybe I'm open.
Yeah. So what if I told you that there is not one feature that is better on an iPhone than it is on an Android? Every camera, functionality, every bit of it.
I keep hearing this. I know.
Right. But you haven't made the decision to go over to an Android. It's because that's not the insight that drives your behavior. Your behavior is actually driven, and Apple knows this, is behavior by how many people in your friend group already have an iPhone. What happens when that person in a friend group who has a Droid sends you a picture and breaks it and you can't all see it? What happens in that space? Social connection is what drives your behavior. My point is, when thinking about these things, we have to stop being surface level marketers and communicators and just think best practice. When you think about what is actually driving a human's behavior. And one of the things that drives humans' behavior is understanding also even short-term memory. You have to see something 7 times, called the rule of 7. You have to see it 7 times before your memory is going to actually remember it. Think about how many times that you've met someone and they told you their name. And
oh my gosh, I was at a holiday cookie party yesterday and I see the same group of women like once, twice a year, and there are a few of them. Every time a few get locked in, but there's one or two where I'm like, still don't remember her name. Yeah.
When I want to remember someone's name, I try to go intentionally. I say 3 times before they leave. Hey, Maria, how you doing? It was so nice to meet you, Maria. So Maria, what did you want to say? Okay, I got it. Because you have to do those things. It's not a good or bad thing. It's a human behavior thing. It's how your mind works. And I think the more that we can think about spending time and resources on things that actually dictate or change behavior, it will give you a better framework for than what you should be doing. Because I would much rather defend that we're going to do these few sets of stories because I want to drill those in, and that's going to be the biggest access, because we've already identified this is our brand problem, this is our awareness issue, and we're going to drill in right now and spend time doing this over everything. Then that's what we're going to have to do. Now, of course, we're in a space, and it's a lot easier for me as a VP to be saying something like that because, hey, Frank, you don't make the decision. You make the decision, so therefore you get it. No, we need to have that as a group. And honestly, that's where data analysis comes in. That's where intentionality comes in. And that's also where your channels being reflective of your strategies and other spaces have to be connected in those points. And so when we think about campaigns, I actually think we should do more of them and think about everything as a campaign, but just of different sizes. There's different sizes and efforts of each campaign. A mini campaign can mean that it's 2 or more places that we're going to tell or ratify a story. A large campaign is going to be over time, and trying to put people into that mindset will cause you to have to be more intentional about every single one of everyone's time, how this story gets told, who gets pulled in, and that to be is where we have to be, because putting things out into the world just as a simple blast, you're assuming all the wrong things. You assume
they care, first of all, that we put out 10 things and they care about all of them equally. If it's 10 different messages, 10 different stories, then it's a lot to process. And it's just, okay, there's a lot of info instead of, I like to call that steady drumbeat, where you get someone's attention. They see it. Oh, I'm seeing that again. Oh, I'm seeing that again. And start building the connection to the brand.
In one of my classes, every year there's a point where I ask the why question. And I phrase it this exact way, which has an expletive in there. I say, why the F should anyone care?
Yes.
And I use that on purpose because it has to be a harsh reality. We, as brands, love our brands already. We believe so much in them. But you cannot, build a marketing or communications effort based off of your love for an institution. You got to do it based off of someone who doesn't, who's asking the question, why should they care about you? Why should they care about you over the 100 emails they got that day, over the marketing they're going to hear on the radio going home, over any of the things, over every Instagram post that they're going to scroll through or TikTok? Why should they care? And if you cannot honestly sit back and answer that question, then you're not doing the work to find the answer that's going to change behavior. And that is what our goal is. Our job is to change behavior, influence behavior, not to just put out something pretty that doesn't do well.
Oh, I love that. I mean, that's a tall order. I think this is going to be a great conversation starter for a lot of listeners to think about themselves, take back to their teams. Why the F should anyone care? Thank you for sharing straight from the classroom.
Yeah.
What is something you've learned in your current role? And then what is something you would offer to people who are in that position of trying to pivot toward really strategic brand storytelling?
The first thing I've learned, and I won't say I learned it necessarily, it was always a constant reminder. Never believe that you are done learning. It's something I live by. It's a hard pill to swallow every now and then too, even for me. I mean, I'm constantly on a mission to learn something. And I'm constantly on a mission trying to say, is this right? Is this right? It may have been right for maybe 5 years, but maybe in year 6, it's not right anymore. And I've got to learn a different way to do a thing. And whether that is in, marketing communications, whether that's in just being the right colleague and the right leader in those spaces. I think it's just important to always stay in a mode of learning. Therefore, you don't close yourself off to what could be a really good idea or a lesson that could help you for the future.
Well, and I think there's so much evolving with AI right now that for me, that's a space where I think we as storytellers and brand marketers, we are just scratching the surface of the impact of AI on our work.
Yeah, I swear, at one point, I really thought I was a social media expert. I'm pretty sure at one point in my career, I was the guy everyone came to learn something about social media. And now my team will come up and they're like, well, we need your opinion on should we be on threads and this, that. And I'm like, threads? What's a thread? I have a thread on my shirt. Is that what that is?
Yeah. Did you jump on Blue Sky?
No, we haven't jumped on Blue Sky yet. So, although that is the question right now.
Yeah.
That is a question.
We're
Yeah.
like holding accounts. We've got names, but the
Mm-hmm.
plan and the activity is not quite there yet.
Yeah. And with any social media, I don't believe on jumping on without a plan, you got to have a 6-month content plan already laid out before you even start, because it's so much to get into those spaces and resources that you'll, again, doing everything versus not. Now, and to answer your question about those who are trying to turn to that strategic side, one, it's keep trying things. Like, don't get out of that space. Whether it's AI, you need to pick something and try it.
Yeah.
It is better to be really, really good at a few things than okay at a whole lot of things. Like, be great at something, So pick a tool, pick a strategy, pick something. If you're pick one campaign and say, we're going to do this. We may be doing all the other things a different way. We're going to do this one thing this one way. And we're going to try something new. We're going to fully give it a shot. I tell the team all the time, I would much rather us fail on doing something that we were strategic about, that we analyzed, that we used data, that we partnered, and that we were efficiently building, and everything was right about our process and it was wrong at the end. I'd rather us do that than not know why something went very, very great and not be able to replicate it. Versus, oh yeah, we got a lot of credit for this one thing and no one understands why it happened. And then now everybody's asking you, do it again. And I have no idea how it happened.
You're sweating bullets. You're like, woo.
Can't replicate that. So,
well, Frank, thank you so much for joining me this week to talk about strategic storytelling. I know listeners are going to love this conversation and your insights and expertise. So thank you again.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And I hope all those out there listening know everybody's in the same boat. The only boat that you need to make sure your team is in is that you're trying something new every single day and moving forward. Try, learn, and I know you'll be able to figure it out on the other side.
And listeners, stay tuned and join me in a week for the next episode of Strategic Storytelling, the art and science of brand narratives. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe to the Pulse Check series on Enrollify, rate, and share with a friend. And until next time, keep sharing stories.
The Higher Ed Pulse is part of the Enrollify Podcast Network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our show helps higher ed marketers and admission pros find their next big idea and features a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Brian Gross, Eddie Francis, Jenny Lee Fowler, and so many of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.